This video is about this tiny little circuit board. Not the circuit board itself, but the solders I'm going to try using on it to test them. And just because I wanted to bring it up to the camera closer like this, I decided to sit in a box, and the handiest box was one that's been sitting here for a few days. It's called a crave box. I almost said grave box there. Given what's in it, it could be a grave box, but crave box, and a bottle of Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Select Whiskey, 45%, which were generously sent by Philip Berger. I hope that it's either Berger or Berger. There's a couple of pronunciations of everything, basically. So before I start this video then, I'd like to thank Philip for this really huge gift. And let's take a look inside the crave box, because that would also be quite interesting. So let's open this up and see what's inside. So this is an American selection pack. So we've got Chex Mix, which I've not tried this. Chex Mix? Do we have Chex Mix in the UK? We've got certain mixes, but I don't think this particular one. Pure Pop. Simply delicious popcorn. 3 ingredients, that's it. Corn, sunflower, oil and salt. So it is just plain popcorn. Nice. Cheez-It Grooves. I've not tried these before. 2 packets of... Oh no, this is original. Cheez-It Original. Famous Amos bite-sized cookies. This is similar to what we'd call Maryland cookies here. This has got a lot of stuff in it. Goldfish baked snack crackers. Do we have fishy shaped? I'm sure we have A style, but I bet they taste different. So these ones have got cheese. They're not just the salty ones. That is new. Fun Dip. This is a bit like a sherbet dip dab. I can see there's sort of what looks like a hard lolly, which I've just snapped, I think, and sherbet to dip it in. That's a bit like our sherbet dip dab, which is just a sort of like strawberry or fruit lolly that you dip in the sherbet. Fruit snacks, Island Fruits, family farmer owned. So these it's based on fruit puree is the most prominent ingredient. That's interesting. Look forward to trying those. Welch's, family farmer owned. This is another of those, but this is the fruit punch. Okay. Nature Valley. I'm pretty sure we have a brand of health bar called Nature Valley here, but I'm not sure it's going to be the same. I think the American ones might be different. That'll be interesting to try. Another of the trail mix. Chewy peanut butter chocolate chip. Quaker. Quaker's a common cereal brand here in the UK, usually Quaker porridge oats and other cereals. But I'm not sure about this. I think this definitely is a sort of Americanish product, I think. Yeah, Chicago. Okay, Nature Valley. Okay, what are these ones? Oats and honey. Granola bar. Do we use the term granola over here? I'm not sure. Chips Ahoy, more chocolate chip cookies. A Hershey's Kiss, which is a little sort of chocolate drop. I've actually eaten the other one of these. There were 2 of them. There's kind of 2 of everything in here. Well, were 2 of everything. This is the naturally flavoured oats and chocolate. Peanut butter chocolate chip. I've had one of those out. Chocolate chip, chewy chocolate chip. Nutri-Grain apple and cinnamon. These look so healthy. Peanut butter. Peanut butter is a recurring theme in American snacks. But toast cheese. I'm looking forward to trying those. Mott's fruit flavoured snacks, assorted fruit. Not a lot of information. Not sure what that is. Laffy Taffy. I'm guessing is that going to be toffee? Sour apple. Okay. These are what we'd call strawberry laces in the UK. Twizzlers. We also have Twizzlers, I'm pretty sure, but I'm not sure it's the same thing. Airheads, artificially flavoured cherry candy. More of these assorted fruit things. And Oreos. Now, Oreos never used to be available in the UK, and then suddenly they took off. It was like the supermarkets... they kind of had a taste of America type thing, and suddenly this they had shelves dedicated to American products, and the Oreos appeared on them. And the Oreos were the one thing that went down so well that we do actually have Oreos here now, but just a massive range. Possibly Oreos that you don't have in America. Maybe I should get some Oreos. Even here in the Isle of Man, where we don't normally get the same sort of selection. You get the peanut Oreos, you get the double thickness ones with the double cream inside, you get the super wafer thin ones, a whole selection, and mint ones and weird other flavours. So these, I'm looking forward to trying these. I'm not all beating them all at once, and I'm not going to do what I sometimes do and eat them in the middle of a video, because that always ends badly. And likewise, I shall refrain from drinking the whiskey until I can share this with my brother. I think he'll appreciate that. So once again, thanks to Philip for sending this over, and I'm going to clear this off, and we shall get to the main subject matter of this video, which is solder. So here is the main subject, and it's solder. And the reason for this video is because Oskar and Ragnar, who are based in Iceland, had a problem with some solder. They'd started building some kits, and they were using their dad's old 50-year-old solder, and it was fine. But then they started running out, and they decided, let's get some from China. We'll get some generic solder from China. And they said they had lots of problems with it. It just wouldn't flow properly. The third solder is Worth, I think it is, which was a solder that they got as a replacement, a better quality solder, and they said it's absolutely fine, it flows really well. So rather than just stop there, I've got some other solders as well. I've got some cheapy Chinese solder that I bought from eBay. This is very, very thin. It's like super thin. It's the sort of thing you'd use maybe for surface mount stuff. It's extra thin. I've got my favourite normal solder, which is from Rapid Electronics. It's not anything fancy. It's just their standard 6040 tin lead with the rosin core flux. I've also got this huge roll here, which I got at the Barras in Glasgow. And there was obviously a factory had been sort of shut down, or they were selling off a lot of their stuff, and part of it was like big rolls of soda. And I saw all these rolls on the shelf, and I grabbed quite a few of them, because that was at the time they were banning lead from manufacturing processes in soda. And I went and grabbed a few, and I said to the guy, oh, I'm so glad to find this, with the traditional lead-based soda, because it's being sort of like being clamped down on. And he immediately jumped up and cleared the shelf off the rest. So I don't know if he was going to put the price up on based on that, or he was just keeping it for himself. But I got this lovely 2 kilogram roll of soda, which I'll be trying. I'm not sure if I've tried this yet. I'm also going to try this no flux solder. As far as I know, this has no flux in it, and so no flux will be given with this. We'll see what happens. And finally, the very last thing, for a very good reason, is going to be this RS solder, which is actually high temperature. Now, I used for a while low melting point solder, which was a mixture of lead, tin and silver. But this is a different ratio. And this is the sort of high temperature version. I loved the low melting point version, and I was hoping to get some of that. I'll have to have another hunt for the low melting point stuff, because that tiny bit of silver had this miraculous effect on the solder joints. It didn't just make it flow beautifully, but they were really shiny. It just made it really nice solder. It was lovely to work with. A lot of my Fairground controllers went out with the silver-based solder, just because, although it was more expensive, it was just pleasant to work with. And that matters. So I'm going to be trying all these, and I'm going to be trying them first on, I was going to just do it on a tinned circuit board, and then I thought, what if the tinning in the circuit board is going to sway this? It might be better actually trying them on raw copper. So I'm going to cut a bit of raw copper circuit board material, and I'm going to try soldering that with these as well, and we'll just see how they flow. The other thing I've got here is tip refresher. Now this is a generic eBay-ish type stuff, and with this it's a mixture of flux. I wonder if it's a mixture of flux and soda usually, and I wonder if this is just sal ammoniac. I'm not sure. But the idea is you dip your tip in it, and it sort of basically plates your tip. It just makes it super clean, because having a super clean, shiny soldering iron tip is absolutely crucial in proper soldering. If your soldering iron tip is crusty and dry, the solder should actually flow onto it and stay in it. If it's just not sticking, if it's just sliding off again and leaving the surface dry, then you have to get a new bit for the soldering iron, or adjust the temperature of the iron, because something is amiss, or give it a good clean. This This one though, as I say, this silver one is the one I'll try last because last time I tried it, I could not recover the tip after I'd used it. Even when I tried it at a higher temperature, it just knacked the tip for some reason. I'm not sure why. So I'm just going to pause momentarily and set this up and we shall begin the experiment. Okay, I'm not sure how this is going to pick up in lighting wise, but let's give it a go. So the first solder I'm going to start with is my usual solder, which is Rapid Electronics, which is a UK company. It's stock number 85-0595 for a 500 gram reel, 22 SWG, standard wire gauge, 0.7 millimeters, that's the outer diameter, 60-40 tin lead with rosin flux. It's just generic solder. It's not a fancy brand, it's just generic. So let's tin the tip here and flow it onto this resistor lead. And that has performed as expected. It's just flowed nicely onto the pad and it's wicked up onto the component lead. So I'm going to flow some onto this pad as well for reference. Yep, it's formed a nice pool. That's nice, that's good. My favourite solder, generic solder. Functional and very affordable, just general purpose solder. The next one I'm going to try is one supplied by Oskar and Ragnar. And this is the old stuff. This is 50-year-old solder from his dad. And solder doesn't really age, so let's try this. Yep, that's flowing well. Let's try pulling it up on that pad. Yep, that's flowed very well. That lots of flux coming out, doing the job properly. Next thing we'll try is what they describe as the crap solder from China. Let's give this a go. They said it just wouldn't melt properly, even when they turned the temperature of the soldering iron up. That looks as though it's done okay. Now this might be down to the fact this pad is tinned already and it's formed a pool okay. That has performed okay. Rightio. So this is the Worth solder, which is the new one that they got. I should maybe clean the tips in case there's any residual flux here. So let's flow this on. Noting that when I solder this, you apply the soldering iron to the pad and then to heat it up and then you flow the solder onto it. You should never put solder on the iron and try and carry it across because the whole point of flux is that it helps the material flow. It mates the solder onto the surfaces, cleans off oxides and it just helps the flowing. So let's pull this up on the pad, flow the solder in and that's another beautiful pool of solder. Okay, now let's try the very thin. This is very, very thin. I'm going to have to compensate for this just by feeding it in faster. It's just like welding, really. If you're welding a thinner wire, you'd simply feed it in faster. So onto the pad it goes and flow it in. I can see the flux coming off, the vapour. That's not lead vapour, that is the flux, the rosin. So that's formed a reasonable joint. Let's pour some into this, make a wee pool. That looks pretty good to me. Now we'll try the no flux given stuff, which has no flux. So let's clean this carefully. And I'm going to flow it in. I'm getting wisps as if there's flux in that. And it is flowing on. I'm wondering if this is mislabeled. I was told this had no flux in it, but you know what? That's got flux in it. Why was that sold as no flux? That's very weird. That has flowed fine. I'll be checking these afterwards carefully. Let's try the new stuff that I've not tried yet. So I'm going to flow. This is much thicker, so I'm going to flow in a smaller quantity. Oh, it smells quite a rich flux, that one. And let's pull. Yep, that's pretty good. I'm wondering then if Oskar and Ragnar maybe need to just nudge the temperature of their iron up a bit. Check the tip is clean and nudge that up. If they've been using tin circuit boards, but you know what? We'll try these just to rule out the possibility. I'll try this in plain copper that's not got the pre-tinning on it because that might be a factor. The one thing I'm not going to do now is I'm not going to use the silver-based solder yet because I don't want to actually wreck the iron tip until I finish the experiment. That seems like a good idea. So I'm going to pause momentarily and I'm going to get a bit of copper. I'm going to chop the copper and I'm going to slide this across. I'm going to place it here and then we'll try the bare copper. Right, so I've got my piece of copper laminate material. I've just chopped about just over an inch off the end of a piece of this unetched printed circuit board material. And I've not cleaned it up or anything because I want this test to be accurate. So this is onto just bare copper that's not been polished or anything like that. So I'm going to start off with the same sequence, trying to remember the order I did them in. I'm going to basically make a pool. I'll put it right up here. And I'm going to start with my rapid electronic solder. And bear in mind it will have to heat the laminate. It's produced a perfect little pool that is mated completely. Let's try the number 1, which is the 50-year-old solder. Good amount of flux in that. Yep, quite a lot of flux in that. It's produced a perfect pool. This is potentially the crap solder. It is slightly crustier, but it has still mated, but I don't know if it's mated as well as the other solders. So it might be an alloy issue there, the ratio. Here's the number 3, which is the Worth, which is what they found was a good solder. I should clean the tip off here between these experiments to avoid solder contamination. That's performed, that's got quite a lot of flux, that's formed a nice pool. What was the next one I tried? It was the my Chinese solder, was it not? The real very thin solder, so I'll be shoving this in like a MIG welder on steroids. It's produced a clear flux. It's mated on perfectly. Okay. Let's try the zero flux. I'm going to end up running out of space here. I can always start next to it. So let's give that a wipe down. This has no flux at all apparently, but I'm not convinced. Although I will say I looked at that joint and it did look slightly peakier. Oh, you know what? Oh, I'm not seeing... the flux has come out of that. I wonder if it's just irregular amount of flux in this. And that's why maybe as it's been manufactured, there are areas without the flux. That's a possibility. You could end up with a roll of solder that the flux operation is intermittent in it. I'm not sure how likely that is to be, because as you go through the roll, it's got flux present or not present. So let's try my huge, luxurious and absolutely bargain 2 kilogram roll. Lovely pool again, a bit splattery. It's shot the flux out the side, that sometimes happens. And now let's ruin the solder iron bit. If what happens last time happens again, I might actually have to increase the temperature of the solder iron bit to even do this. So let's try on this joint first. It's fizzing and popping. It's formed a slightly crusty joint. Maybe it's too cold for that. Although it has made the joint, but it looks quite dry. Let's try it here. Well, that's quite an aggressive flux that's coming out of that. It's definitely... Oh, it's stuck to the tip. It doesn't want to come off the tip now. That's what happened last time. And it is a much higher melting point. Tell you what, I'm going to bump the temperature up. Let's put it up by 20 degrees Celsius. I had it at 340 degrees Celsius, but I'm not sure how accurate. Generally with these electronic soldering stations, judge it by feel. It's like when you're welding and everything like that. You just have to go by how it flows, how comfortable you feel. As you get more experience of solder, it just all makes sense. It's the only way you can learn how to solder properly is just to do it. And over time, you'll suddenly find that you're getting quite picky. You're actually trying solder and saying, oh, that's not very good solder. Or you're throwing it in and you'll learn the characteristics. You'll learn which metals solder sticks to and which metals it really doesn't, and you'll learn soldering techniques. So that's the temperature. Should have come up. Let's try this again. It's a very aggressive splattery flux. It's kind of, ugh. Yeah, that is very high temperature. I wonder what the temperature of this is. I want to point out there's nothing wrong with this solder, probably. It's just high temperature solder. It's designed for a much higher temperature for electronics applications where you want that higher temperature, where it's likely to melt weaker solders, the lower temperature solders. Now, just out of interest, is this soldering iron screwed now? Let's use my favourite solder. Is it going to mate onto the tip? Yeah, it's fine. So what on earth happened last time? Yeah, that's it, recovered. It didn't do that last time I tried that solder. This is with a higher temperature, by the way. This is at set to 360, if it is that. So, yes. Right, I'm going to take a look at these joints with a microscope now, and then I'll tell you what they look like. Okay, one scrutiny later. The only ones that I thought looked a bit suspicious were the high temperature stuff. That's the stuff that's got all the flux round it here, the dark flux. Incidentally, I raised the temperature to 400 degrees Celsius on the iron, and the high temperature flux solder flowed fine. It wasn't, that was just purely because it was at too low a temperature. It's quite an aggressive flux it's got though, that dark flux, quite stinky. In this case, because I ran it at this sort of lower temperature, it's formed a dryish finish. It's not something I'd trust for a solder joint because, well, it just wasn't done at a high enough temperature. The other one that was slightly suspicious was the one that where is it? It's the one that I thought had no flux. And whereas the standard solder joints, the solder had done what it should do and it's flowed up in that nice curve and come back down like that. That one in particular, the lead, it had flowed right up against it like that. It had gone quite spiky and peaky. It looked as though it was mating, especially at the end, but it just looked a bit rough and it had gone up much higher. It had been much more brittle, so to speak. And that just leaves one more question then, because I've found more solder. Now, this is a 4060 alloy and it's 3.25 millimeter, 10 steel wire gauge, standard wire gauge. And this is super thick. So the question is, how is this going to solder? Is this going to flow okay? Yes. So the question is, can I use this to do a solder joint on the circuit board? I don't even know if this stuff's got flux in it, but it must have flux. Yeah, it's got flux. Yeah, I'm even managing to do solder joints with that. That just goes to show you that, you know, when you've been soldering for a long time, I suppose it's like welders again, you just get to know the material you're working with, and it just becomes possible to use even quite bad materials with relative ease, or at least get them to work. So yeah, that was interesting. I'd like to thank Oskar and Ragnar for sending the samples of solder through that they'd tried. I don't think there was a problem with that solder unless the bit that you used had zero flux in it. It may just have been a shortage of flux, or the temperature of the iron may have been wrong, or you might have been carrying the solder across, not sure, or the tip of the iron may not have been shiny and glossy and ready to take that solder. But it was certainly good to try all these solders. This one is the surprising one. I thought this one had no flux, but I'm seeing that characteristic little island around it that does suggest it did have flux of sorts. I wonder if it was just an off mix or something like that. But yeah, very interesting. So yeah, that's was certainly worth doing that experiment. I'll have to see if we can find some other. You know, that's what I should do. That's what I should do now. I should order more solders from eBay, get the cheapest, shittiest solders I can get, and see what happens when I try soldering with them. That would be quite a good video. Yeah, I think we should do that. That would be quite interesting to see. When I was reviewing the footage of the earlier part of that video, I noticed that when I was soldering pulls on this, what I thought was a little burst of flux forming around them, it turned out that wasn't the situation. Now, this is a cheap and nasty laminate. It's not a laminate I normally choose to use. I just ended up with some. And it's called SRBP. And SRBP stands for synthetic resin bonded paper, and it's basically multiple layers of paper fixed together, pressed together with resin, and then a layer of copper on top. And it's very generic. You see this stuff in cheap products all the time because it's a very cheap laminate, and it's also, instead of drilling it, if you've got a real mass production application, you can actually put it between metal plates with holes drilled and a punching system, and you can physically punch every single hole in the circuit board with one crunch, just forcing those punches through it. So it's quite popular for that, but MD who's ever worked with this will know that when you try repairing it, the copper often delaminates from the resin-bonded paper. That's why I prefer FR4 type fiberglass circuit board material, because it does provide a much better bond between the copper and the fiberglass. But here's what was actually happening. As I soldered those little pools of solder, that I was getting a sort of rim would appear around it. And I initially thought that was the flux flowing out. It just looked like it. But in reality, if you looked from the side, what was actually happening was that as that pool of solder heated the air underneath, it kind of, initially it just formed a sort of, the copper just popped up at the side there. But if you hold it on even longer, the whole copper layer just domes up. And I'll demonstrate that right now. So let's get this out of the way. Let's bring in the piece of copper and let's zoom down for a closer look. And then I shall abuse it. So I'm going to pile on the solder, I'm going to leave it, I'm going to put it right in the middle here, and then we'll just watch what happens. So can you see it's kind of popped up there in a sort of dome? Let's try again. And I'll just hold this on for ages and see if I can really abuse it. Oh, there, it's popped right up. And then if you hold it on, it sort of, it stabilizes, but as it cools down again, that shrinks. The expanded gas then just sort of shrinks back, and there's a bit of flux around that, but it's created this sort of rim. It's, well, the copper has basically delaminated underneath. Interesting. I just thought I'd mention that just in case you too thought it was flux coming out the sides when it really wasn't. There's another thing I can mention here. One of the things that Oskar and Ragnar sent across with this, they sent a few chocolate bars, but the most interesting one is this. Now, they are based in Iceland. And this is a common Iceland snack. I do recall flying to Florida via Iceland and Icelandair and buying quite a lot of this at the airport because it's very nice. It's a common confection, and it's basically a chocolate coated with a layer of marzipan, the yellow marzipan here, and a layer of licorice. Marzipan and licorice is really common in Iceland. It's very nice. I'm going to have a wee bit of that now. Oh, memories coming back of just how good that candy was. Good sweets. So yes, that is really just an extra bit I want to add, and the fact by featuring this now, I get to eat it now, which is also quite a bonus. But just in case you thought that was the flux flowing out, in some of them was just that little island of copper just popping up, giving that illusion.